Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome one and all to teissTalk, Thursday's teissTalk, your highlight of your week. I know. I trust everybody had a lovely break and ignored those NHS guidelines about the fact that Easter eggs don't have to be eaten in one go, because obviously they do. So I trust everybody had a good break, and we are ready for another few weeks of teissTalk. We have got, excuse me, we have got a great show for you today and some lovely guests. We're talking about how AI can improve your security and compliance programs. First off though, of course, we have the teissTalk mug for the best question, comment, anything that makes us laugh, anything that makes us cry, anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, or even just randomly selected, let's face it. So please do ask a question and you will be up in the running for a teissTalk mug. So without further ado, can I please invite onto stage Jonathan, Herman, and Dean? Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, Herman.
Hello.
And hello, Dean.
Hello, everyone.
Now, we may be joined by one other. We're not sure yet. It's a little bit touch and go, so we'll see. So if a random person pops up, we're not about to be swindled out of money. They probably are supposed to be here. Also, one other point. Herman is our sponsor for today. So if you are enjoying a free cup of tea, coffee, and some biscuits, you can thank Herman for that. And I'm sure we'll be hearing just a few, and I stress a few snippets about Vanta and what they do as well. But it's all relevant, is all I can say. So let's get cracking. Let's get straight on to the news item, shall we? The headline is, and it's from our friends of the show, Info Security Magazine, and it's the headline is U.S. Treasury urges financial sector to address AI cybersecurity threats. I mean, you could probably swap out U.S. Treasury, financial sector, and put in just about anybody anywhere. So UK government, Singaporean government urges any sector to address AI security, cybersecurity threats. But let's face it, the financial sector is pretty big for us. So for this, I think, AI-based cyber threats to the financial sector are quite significant. I mean, we could lose, well, frankly, billions and, quite a few percentage points off the GDP. We should be sitting up and taking note of these kinds of warnings, right?
Absolutely, Tom. I think that we are, as we were just saying off camera before, I think we are reaching an inflection point in the industry where these threats are now becoming much more commonplace, and I think it will continue to be so. And I think any attempt to ignore or avoid them would be a little bit King Canute of us, and trying to hold back the tide is that it is here to stay, and actually the sooner we start to get to grips with it, the better.
I think there's also the topic of, yes, this comes as an urge from regulators, from politicians, but the reality is that we see those threats on a daily basis in our lives. Which is your simple message, but then it's that call of that robotic voice can very well translate into a friendly voice from someone that says, hey, it's mom, can you send me 200 quids right now? If it's the voice of your mom, you're probably going to trust it immediately. That can be a AI generated model that is just mimicking the voice of your mom when you just posted a video on Instagram during Easter as you were eating a wall Easter egg.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a thing, isn't it? AI right now, although, like I said, we're coming up to an inflection point here, but AI right now is not going to change the threat per se, but it's going to make it potentially more aggressive, more effective, more realistic, etc. I mean, Dean, where's your viewpoint on AI here? Is it all just stuff and nonsense, or are we actually talking about very real threats?
That's a great question. I really do think it is a very real risk to every business entity. If we think about what happened back in February, there was a financial worker in a Hong Kong financial institution, and the hackers use AI to create a virtual video conferencing session with his supervisor and several other high level executives, and swindled the firm into wiring $25 million to the hackers through a completely fraudulent
Yeah.
deep fake type experience. I mean, so if we think about it, and this is someone who's trained in financial risk, someone who has processes in place to approve transactions, and they were still beguiled into sending a lot of money to the hackers. So yes, it's very relevant to every business that handles money in large amounts.
Now, call me cynical, which many people do. I think I'm having my middle name changed to that. Call me cynical, but if that was me and I'd been swindled out of a lot of money at my place of employment, was probably facing, getting fired or something, I'd also come up with a really great story like that as well. Well, boss, you'll never guess what happened. I was on this call and it was you, and said, so, and yeah, I know I'm half joking here, but I think, as Jonathan said, this inflection point, if we're not at it, we're very close to it. It's yet to be absolutely confirmed, aside from this person's, word, and I'm, not suggesting otherwise, but it's yet to be confirmed that this is in active use. And if it is, that must have taken a huge amount of coordination and effort, etc. But we are close to that sort of sci-fi presence, or that sci-fi AI presence, aren't we? And it's kind of, how do we even legislate for something like this?
Well, it really comes back to the people. Making sure, because at the end of the day, the humans are the weakest link in the supply chain of data and finances, and being able to train users on how to appropriately use it, how to look out for it. You still should have the same process on any wires that are large, where you call the person requesting it and you verify it, out of band with another method. Right? That's been used in the financial sector for years. I had two wires come in yesterday, and in both cases, they called me on the phone with the number I'd given them in advance. They confirmed the routing number, the bank number, the account name, all of the things that would be required. That was done to ensure that this type of fraud doesn't occur. And so really, it's going back to our roots. How do we protect ourselves from losing money, regardless of the threat? There are ways that can still be highly effective.
I think
we can go beyond that.
Sorry,
go on, Herman.
Sorry,
you're sponsoring, Herman. You can go first.
No, that's fine. I think we can actually go beyond the concept of just financial fraud, because I think the financial fraud is probably a very obvious that creates a big impact, because it's a sudden loss of 25 million. However, there are scenarios where you might give out a bit of a piece of information here today, another piece of information tomorrow, without realizing it. You're probably causing more harm, because you might give access to your environment through some social engineering or phishing attacks that might lead to larger compromise in organization. So sometimes that's where we also maybe focus our attention to the less obvious scenarios, where some people are just calling for information.
It's almost that salami slicing approach of, let's get a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, and do that for the next 3 months. And then we can build up, or even the AI can build up, this massive, very functional picture of what's needed to be done. Jonathan, what were you going to say?
Just to build on Dean's point, I think that having some very, very simple and time-honored sort of additional methods of approval for processes. I mean, we're talking specifically financial there, but I think it applies across the board. If you're being asked to transfer data, if you're being asked to do any significant business operation, then you need to have more than one point of approval or one method of approval. And I think that therefore you can, and I would highlight as well that the methods have to be different, because obviously if you're doing the same thing effectively twice, then if one of them has been compromised, the chances are it's been compromised twice. It does pose a slightly interesting question, though, just to build further, to go on a slightly dystopian view of Dean's idea of just ringing up your colleague and saying, oh, can you just confirm all of this information about that routing, the routing you've just said, and then you've got an AI voice on the other end of the phone. And then you get into multiple layers of the onion of how far is an attacker going to go to use AI to generate things to get your approval. So without diving too far down that rabbit hole, it depends, as I said, how dystopian you want to be about it. But I think that kind of multiple methods of approval, multiple methods of reassurance is a quite simple means of giving ourselves a little bit more security and reassurance.
So there's a great question from Peter, because I just want to pivot slightly on make these last points on this news story before we move on to the panel proper. But Peter Fink has made a great point in here. Can AI really protect us from AI, or will we have to find a robust organizational process of cryptographic security to cope with these kinds of threats? And I want to tie that into a point from the article, which says, these unique cyber threats from AI also include data poisoning attacks on the target's AI. So you might, who's to say that the AI model you're using for, I don't know, investment, for approvals, for whatever these financial institutions do, has not actually been, kneecapped from underneath and is letting stuff fly out. And that's for even a large institution like a bank, that's an incredibly complex thing to be able to have to deal with.
Yeah, I'll say that, the one common thread with AI and machine learning and predecessors is that the size does matter. The larger the data set you have, the more training that you can apply to known good data points, the more accurate the AI. If you let the AI leverage public sources, then you're going to have misinformation, you're going to have hallucinations, you're going to have all of these things that make the data set unreliable. But if you train and you're using data sets that are extremely large and verified prior to writing your prompts and your prompt engineering that you do to get the outputs you desire, you can have much, much higher confidences that it's accurate. So you're right, the AI can poison the data set if you let it, but you also have the guardrails. You put guardrails up on where you're reliant on that AI, you use private instances, and then you have a much stronger confidence level that this data is going to be reliable.
I think that moves into sort of the first bullet point in the discussion about how we can advise our organizations to use AI internally in a robust and secure manner. Because I think, to Dean's point, I've already seen it in my organization and others, and I'm sure all of us are on the call, and lots of people, and all of us who are listening are familiar with this situation of it just kind of creeping into an organizational sort of environment, almost by the back door, and it's almost kind of the shadow IT situation on steroids. Where because it's so easy and so ubiquitous and so easily accessible for people, that generative AI models now, they are just everywhere, and people are going, oh well, and I've already seen horror story examples in the media about people putting sort of business sensitive information into a public platform generative AI, and then suddenly wondering why all of that business sensitive information is plastered all over the internet. And while that feels like a bit of an obvious issue to box off, I think that it's very easy to overlook that the use of AI by most people is still in its absolute infancy. And that people do not have a very good grasp of what AI is, of what it does and can do, and of what and how they manage their interactions with it. So to Dean's point, if we have internal instances of AI, great. because then they are bounded, they are constrained. We know what we're doing with them, and we know what they can do and they're allowed to do. But the moment we go outside onto public platform instances of generative AI, then we are in the Wild West. Yeah. And I think that's where we want to be really careful about what our organizations use, their employees in our organizations are using, because then we can say, well, we can't control where that data is coming from, and therefore we can't control any of the outputs from it, and we don't know that any of it is even vaguely reliable. Mm-hmm. So I think there's and to Dean's point about sort of having our own generative AI models internally and what data we're using to feed them, I think it's super important that that data quality and integrity on those models is absolutely paramount. So again, we've got to be really, really careful how we're obtaining that data and cleaning that data before it's going into any kind of internal model. So I think there's a whole raft of considerations, and that's just about how we're using AI within our own businesses, let alone how we're defending against threat actors using AI.
And that's the same principle for any kind of large-scale system. We need, this is what, software bill of materials came from, because we needed to know what was going into our products in the first place. It's like that, but as you said, on steroids, right? It's like that, but a much more complex program. So I think we've pivoted and segued very nicely into the panel itself, and we come to the point where, let's bring it back, and let's take an organization. It might have dabbled, or it might have even heard of AI, etc. As InfoSec leaders, probably our knee-jerk reaction to anything like this would be to say no, or at least it would be in the old days, right? Before, because we've all grown up and we've all become, the hippie CISO who says yes to everything. But the knee-jerk reaction is to say no for all the reasons, Jonathan, you just mentioned about all our data being spread all over the internet, etc. But actually, that's not how we need to be, right? This has got to be a risk-based approach. So what's the first step we should be taking, with our organizations, with our people, with our leadership and our boards?
So I'll jump in here if that's okay.
Yeah.
I feel like it's super important to, like you said, understand your risk profile. How risk tolerant are you as an organization, and how important is AI to ensuring that you can be competitive and maintain a competitive advantage over your other, competitive companies that you work against every day. I'll use my company as an example. So FileVine, we're case management and doc management. Well, documents are extremely effective examples or use cases for AI, because if a law firm has 20 or 30 years of documents, briefs, results from cases, and it's all been vetted by the court, it's all been argued by opposing counsel. So you have work product that's extremely accurate and relevant to a particular jurisdiction or court, right? So if you're able to take 30 years of that data, and then you're able to create new documents by embedding the docs into the AI and doing the comparisons, and then you can generate new documents that are, again, highly reliable because of the source data. So in our case, we've decided that we have to use AI to help our attorneys and our clients get the best outcome, the best work product. And of course, they have an obligation to review everything, right?
Yeah.
You've probably heard in the courts several cases where attorneys just took data directly from ChatGPT and they filed it. And then they were disbarred because the information had fake sources, because ChatGPT is highly creative, right? But there are other AIs where you can tune the creativity down to zero. It's completely fact-based, and then you're able to use it with known work product to create new documents. So it all comes back to your risk appetite and how important it is to use AI appropriately, and then to defend it and to make sure that those guardrails are in place so you're not putting any of your clients' data out into the public domain, et cetera.
So Herman, you must be having these sorts of conversations with new clients, at Vanta, people who may not necessarily even have even thought about using AI in their organizations, etc. And what's what's the first place to start, and what's the most compelling argument here?
I think it's various elements here. AI is a very broad term. So I think there's a generative AI, there's a machine learning models, there's regression analysis, there's like multiple things that are used today. There are very simple use cases such as ChatGPT is probably the one that is widely known. Even my mom knows about it. But for example, a specific topic on the algorithms that are used to self-driving a car, that's a whole different aspect of accuracy. There's no room for error. There's no room for hallucinations, because if there is a room for hallucination, people might die in a car accident. So I think where you start from an organization is really understanding where does AI fit into, are you an AI producer? Are you an AI developer? Or are you just an AI user? It's really based on risk. As Dean said before, what's your risk profile? What's your risk appetite? But I think at this stage, for an organization that wants to start with implementing AI, they really have to start with the principles of transparency, explainability, what's the level of automation, what's the life cycle model, what's the data governance here? Because I think an organization that wants to jump into the AI, let's say, bandwagon today, you might want to do it, but you have to consider data governance before. Because if you have not considered data governance, if you don't have a strong infrastructure in your organization, and also if you don't have skilled engineers that can build those models for you, then you might increase your level of risk. So what we're seeing is either a combination of companies starting to use NIST AI risk management framework to build up their compliance process, or some companies are slightly more advanced. They're going into ISO 42001 and get that certification in place to prove that they're responsibly developing and using AI models. So that's what we're seeing today.
So just let's expand on that ISO 42001. Which just for our audience, what standard is that?
Yeah, so bit of context in this. The EU released the draft version of the AI Act. And shortly after, we saw ISO publish ISO 42001, which is an artificial intelligence management system that is exactly the same structure as ISO 27001. It's a certifiable management system. It helps organizations responsibly develop and use AI. Now, the interesting topic here is that we were waiting for ISO 42001 to be published in June this year, but it was published in December last year. So we had to really rush into developing it because there was a lot of demand for it. So yeah,
maybe they used AI to fast track it. Has anybody actually read the documents? I mean, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe there's all sorts of stuff in there.
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting topics in there in terms of how the structure of the management system is very similar to ISO 27001.
Which is great.
They did a great work on Annex A, though.
Yeah.
But maybe the first one could be AI generated. Why not? We can test it.
Yeah. Well, and to Herman's point, it's really all about reputation management, AI governance, practical guidance on how to leverage AI in your organization. I mean, that's really, ISO's done a good job of kind of helping us establish what are these guardrails we should be paying attention to, because it's back to that whole thing. We have to have data governance in our environments because the risk is very real. If you open up AI and you give AI access to your internal docs, next thing you know, you'll have an employee saying, who makes the most money in the company? Who owns the most shares, right? If the AI will now become an intelligence gathering tool for things that people simply shouldn't know about.
And in fact, probably the adoption of AI in of itself is probably, the technology is probably the easiest part. You either get one of your internal tech folks to jump on it, or you go out to a third party to get onto it. But but the data governance, the responsible usage of it, the management, of it, the ethical and moral, usage of it. That's where I think the real fuzzy areas are. That's where we're going to, and also especially as the regulations are evolving over time. So the EU draft has put out the first draft. That's obviously going to evolve quickly, or a number of times. NIST were obviously very quick in getting this stuff out, but it's going to change as we've seen. AI has evolved so quickly that we have to, we're in chase-up mode. So actually, that sort of governance side of things is going to be the hardest part, to my mind.
And I think that's possibly the most difficult conversation for organizations to have internally, is actually to not to use Herman's term, not to get caught up in the bandwagon, and go, well, AI is the thing, so we have to have AI, because at the end of the day, it's like, what's use case or use cases? Why do you need it? What savings is it bringing to your business, whether it be time, cost, whatever, economy of scale? What's it bringing to the business that's an improvement, as opposed to, oh, we want AI? I mean, I was particularly interested in the study that was done a couple of years ago about new startups in the UK that used the word AI in their business model, basically, and 40 to 45% of them had no AI component in what they were doing. So they're just using, they were saying in their PR blurb, we use AI because it was the fashionable thing to do. And I think, and I think now that it's even more so, businesses are getting into the fact, oh, we have to have AI because everybody else has got AI or competitors are using AI. And they're skipping very, very lightly over the really weighty question of why. Why are we using it? What do we use it for? I think this goes to Dean and Herman's points, but both is actually to establish those critical guide rails and guardrails rather within your business. You actually have to understand what you're trying to do in the first place, and what do you want AI to do for you? What's it bringing to the party, rather than you going, oh, well, we're using AI for whatever. And I think so it's having that quite frank understanding internally of what you want to use it for. And then secondly, I suppose operating on kind of an honesty box principle across the business to go, look, if you feel that your function within the business has a valid use case for using AI, flag it, and we'll look at it. And we'll put some wraparound around it in terms of your legal and regulatory compliance, in terms of your IT security, in terms of your data privacy. All of these things need to wrap around it and go, yeah, this is a completely legitimate use case. Let's make sure we do it properly, as opposed to somebody going, oh, well, to your earlier point, Tom, it's, if we ask IT or we ask the DPO or we ask somebody, they'll say no. So we're just going to use it anyway and make do. And then all of a sudden, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, the likes of the CISO and the DPO are pulling the hair out because they're going, where the bloody hell did this come from? Excuse my French. But it's
that's a huge assumption that the CISO has hair. I'm just saying.
Let me
CISOs are available, but anyway.
Let me draw an example here on something that is similar but not exactly related to AI. I will not mention the name of the company, but there's a well-known company that has trialed selfless checkout, where you can go into a store, take whatever you want, and then as you walk out, you will be charged for that transaction. Now, that might definitely have AI involved into how that checkout process is run. However, they're walking away from that particular project because the cost involved with running that sort of automation was higher than the actual cost of having a physical person at the checkout. So I'm also thinking, we are always saying, hey, there's AI that can solve this problem. AI can do this. AI can do that. However, there's also the think of, does it really need to be all AI? Because AI definitely can help us summarize some tasks, like analyze large complex data, but does it need to be there to ride every single thing we do today on the internet. So that's also an interesting topic.
It's that discrete use, isn't it? Let's work out where, as an organization, we may not be able to leverage, AI, but the poor fellow, and I'm going to draw on your examples here, Herman, for obvious reasons, but the poor fellow who has to fill out all those third-party spreadsheets for due diligence and all that sort of thing, that individual may well be able to hugely benefit from that. Or the person who's in procurement, who's having to do assessments of all the third parties, that person, there could be a huge amount of benefit to that person in that singular, environment with these, guardrails in place. There would be a huge amount of time, effort, and resource saving, which can be used better elsewhere. And that would seem to me to be the most effective way to use AI, rather than a blanket, right, we're now an AI organization.
Yeah, I think I'd also say that it's probably a great application of the old "just because we can doesn't mean we should" adage.
Yeah.
Is that we can probably bolt AI into almost any business process somewhere, but whether it actually produces any benefit or not is an entirely different conversation. So I think very much agreeing with Herman's point is that it's just we need to be quite ruthless with ourselves and just say, why do we want to do this, and what benefit is it bringing to us to use this? Because to go back to your point, Tom, the technology in a way, strangely, is the easy bit.
Yeah.
If we want to use an AI, we can use it. That's it, as you say, off the shelf, whatever. But coming back to the why question is probably the much harder part.
There's a question in here. It's from Ugo, which I like this one. Are we saying that it is not possible to purge an organization's AI if they notice a level of contamination with wrong information had occurred? That's an interesting one. How do you back out of this? What's your plan B?
So I think many firms have, it's like any other data sources. When you have a large data set and you're trying to determine your data models and whatnot, a lot of it comes down to timing. You're able to, this isn't like blockchain where it's immutable. This is something that you can modify. You can look at your data sets. You can go back to a known point in time, or you can even branch your data set. So it's certainly not, a deal killer for using the tool, but clearly you have to have some understanding of the time frame of when that corruption or that contamination, poisoning has occurred, and attempt to replace that data. But as your data set gets larger and larger and larger with known good data points, it becomes less relevant, because then the percentage of inaccuracy is much smaller, and it's actually going to get to the point where it's much better than humans can do. I mean, if we think about processing 10,000 pages of legal case data, a human's going to go through 500, 600, maybe 1,000 pages and get fatigued and not be able to remember the relevant points. But an AI can go through, assuming you put the processing power behind it, can go through all 10,000 pages and still pull out the relevant facts on page 9,999, whereas most humans won't go that far.
Yeah.
There's probably two components here that are interesting as a sort of one is from the AI Act, the other one is from ISO 42001. I think that's where surprisingly regulation in this case came with tools to really help organization achieve something positive, let's say.
Okay.
There's one part in the AI Act that says that organizations that are either developing or delivering AI models should have the ability of human intervention in certain cases. So they should maintain logs if the AI is providing, say, outputs that are not respecting the parameters that have been identified. There should be the ability for human intervention in terms of correcting that output. So I think that's one interesting topic. Now, How will we be able to implement that? It's another discussion, right? Because in terms of being able to have that human intervention. The other one is the AI impact assessment, that is reviewing the impacts that your AI might have for your stakeholder group. That can be various people, that is your internal organization, your user groups, other people. Let's say there's a generative AI to like generate videos or audio of people that can be potentially dangerous or can be definitely used for good, or like self-driving cars. These are all things that we might want to be able to like review with potential tools given by regulations.
Yeah, that makes
I think
sense.
that there's also a consideration for this around data protection, and I know that there's that sort of data privacy law around automated profiling and decision making. So there is a very serious consideration there if we're using AI tools to make decisions about data. And we have to be very, very clear within organizations where we are doing that. And I know this comes back very much to the point we made earlier about use cases and understanding what we're trying to do with the AI within our own businesses, because there are quite significant legal implications if we're going to start doing if we start making sort of decisions via AI. And that's not to say that it's impossible. It's just that there is, again, further compliance hoops that we have to jump through to make sure that we're doing it in a robust and secure manner, and that also that all of our customers are aware of that as being a thing that we do. So I think there are just these additional considerations now, and I think this is where, to Herman's point around compliance frameworks, can be really useful for organizations. Particularly organizations that don't necessarily have a lot of familiarity with the technology that they're using, if it's new or novel, to say, this is how you can be compliant, and gives them a really, really good sort of clear understanding of, if you follow this, then you're going to become more compliant. So I think there's a huge amount of benefit to be gained from some of these compliance frameworks.
And I think it echoes a comment that was made by Hendrik. It's far too long, Hendrik. I'm not going to read it all out, but it was just talking about how AI should be used for supporting processes. There needs to be, that human input and that human interest in here, etc., and how the standards help support this. He also made a dig about the UK not being in Europe as well. So I'm afraid that's you out of the running for the mug there, Hendrik. But nonetheless, I think it's still a valid point for sure. So yeah, I think we're getting to the point now where it's so endemic, it's so everywhere, that we have to start, even as cybersecurity professionals, we have to start to provide this level of business advice to our organizations and to our leadership that is actually going to be directing the direction that business goes in quite clearly. Because for many businesses, it's just going to be a case of, we have to do this. If we don't do this, we're going to be left behind. When, frankly, that's not actually going to be the case.
Yeah, I'd probably say, in most cases, I agree with you, Tom. In some business verticals, it is going to be the differentiator. I've been in the legal industry for 25 years, and I feel like AI is actually going to be one of those transformational technologies that helps knowledge workers get work done quicker and for less expense, so that they can serve and provide those that are underserved in the legal space, where they need help with immigration papers, or they need help with different cases, and where they would normally not be able to afford good legal care or legal assistance. And now I believe AI will help to drive the costs down to get help that they need, and will be a real enabler and again, a shifting technology for legal and knowledge workers and anyone that deals where their output is written work product. So this could be auditors, like you said, with those questionnaires. These could be anyone that has to do compliance and ensuring that all of the the compliance regimes that they have to comply with, or privacy regimes, and that their paperwork aligns. I mean, I think that's what Vanta and Drata and SecureFrame and some of these automated tools can do by, allowing templates, using good policies and procedures, and then having the AI help you update them with the new laws that have just come out, or update you with the new security controls from NIST or other organizations. So I do believe in the cybersecurity space, including compliance and privacy and internal audit, are going to see significant benefits from AI helping them improve the quality and speed at which they can comply.
Now, I want to spend 90 seconds because we're in the last 5 minutes now, but I just want to spend 90 seconds because Ugo has come up with another question. I think Ugo knows he's got a mug on the way. So how easily can we audit the information captured by AI over a given time? And if possible, how regular should this take place? And could another AI be required to carry out the audit? Now, this is an interesting. We touched on it earlier about when we spoke about human intervention and when we talked about poison data sets, etc. But how do you audit something this complex?
I mean, it feels to me a little bit like Who Watches the Watchmen, but I suppose in principle, if it's that complex of a data set that only an AI can manage it, then really only you would think logic would dictate only another AI could audit it,
or an AI on the blockchain. Maybe and without sort of becoming a sort of self-cannibalizing cycle, I suppose the best way to look at it would be any AI involved in any activity in any system, as long as there are those constraints put in place to begin with on what it can and cannot do and what its functionality is, then you should have that reasonable degree of security to say, well, we know it's not going to suddenly produce hallucinations and completely left field results and things we're not anticipating because you've constrained it. And I think this feels to me as a bit of a theme throughout the conversation, is that it all comes back to these guardrails, these constraints around these AI systems that we're using to say we know what they can do and what they cannot do because we've prescribed it. Yeah. So we come to the end. I'm going to go round. I'm going to give each of you, well, because of the time, 10 seconds. The question we ask is, what should our audience do when they get back to their desks tomorrow morning? What's the practical first thing they should do as regards AI in their organization, etc., and using this in their sort of security and compliance programs? What's the one thing they should do? And Jonathan, you're on my screen at the moment. Let's start with you.
I'd say go back and make sure that you can foster a cards on the table, frank conversation with all of your business colleagues about who's using it and why, so you can best support them in finding the right use cases and supporting those right use cases. Because if people aren't willing to talk to you about it, then it's going to be a lot harder to find it and support it.
Yeah, shadow IT concept. Dean?
I think that it's very important, just kind of echoing what Jonathan mentioned, it's important to let our employees know that if they're using a public source, anything they put in there, it becomes public. So if they're looking at, client data or looking at potential customer data and they send us examples of a brief or a memo, you can't just put that into a public data source because now you've made it public and it may be someone's personally identifiable information. So just awareness, understanding the safe uses of it, and then making everyone in the company know or understand that you have available AI that has been protected, it is safe, and give them a mechanism because they're going to want to use something. Right?
Yeah,
they want to have a better outcome. So providing a way for them to use it safely and with, proper authority.
Great. Herman, final words from you.
Whether you're developing, providing, or using AI, I think you should go and seriously start planning to implement ISO 42001 in your organization as an immediate step. You can do it with us at Vanta or do it yourself manually, but I think it's definitely something that I would seriously consider because it will provide a lot of benefit for you to implement your AI in a more effective way.
So it's a great framework, quite literally, for actually giving you some guidance on how to do it, and do it safely.
Yeah, totally.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you. I've just got 3 things remaining to say. So first of all, well, Ugo, you already know it's you. So Ugo, well done. Congratulations on winning teissTalk mug. 2 questions. Very good. It was your first one that swayed it for me, though. So congratulations, Ugo. Secondly, don't forget to join us in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to be talking about selling InfoSec as a business enabler, that old chestnut. But it comes up all the time for good reason, because we really need to get it right. And all that remains for me to say is, well, firstly, thank you to our panelists. Jonathan, thank you. Herman, thank you. And Dean, thank you. And also thank you, Herman, for being our sponsor. The tea and biscuits were very, very good. The pink wafers especially, I think, were an inspired choice. And all that now remains for me to say is thank you, the audience, for joining us. And don't forget to stay secure, my friends.